Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout, where we give you information and we interview people, law enforcement, first responders, military from all around the world to give you information on how they fight burnout, tips and tricks, and just have conversations. We do have programs, obviously, that help counteract burnout, prevent it. We do it for police departments and also individuals. If you want to learn more, go to createfromwhy.com. That's createfromwhy.com and find out more. You can always send us an email at createfromwhy@gmail.com. And we're more than happy to help you out, send you in the right directions, and do whatever we can to help make sure that you keep loving what you do every single day like it was the first day. So today we have a special guest. He is a retired security and law enforcement leader, Air Force, police, done a lot of stuff. He'll tell us all about it. I'm excited to interview him. It is his first podcast, which is awesome. I love it when we get to, pop people's cherry about the getting them on podcasts. And so without further ado, Randy Gernhardt, I believe I pronounced that right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? I know you've got a lot of experience with law enforcement, both within military and outside of military. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. So I'm a 26-year law enforcement veteran. My titles have included Reserve Deputy Sheriff. I was a patrolman for two agencies, civilian agencies, and I was also an Army military police officer in the National Guard and a security forces member for U.S. Air Force Reserve. 2006, I went full-time into the Air Force Reserve and moved my way up the ranks. And my last law enforcement position was as a deputy chief and overseeing the organization, training, and equipment of 37 organizations with around 5,000 law enforcement personnel. During that time, some of my duties included presidential protection. So the Secret Service would work with us, or actually we would work with them, because they're always in charge.
I know how that is. Yeah, I've worked alongside them here in New Zealand. They came over when Biden was vice president, and yeah, you're working alongside them, not them, you.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then other large scale events like air shows, where hundreds of thousands of people come to see all these different aircraft, and we would have to secure multiple aircraft, multiple people, parking, traffic, which we didn't do it alone. We did it with all these local, state, federal law enforcement agencies to make sure everything ran smooth. Um, Also, during this time, I was a volunteer fireman and an emergency medical technician. So throw all that in together, and
You're a very
I had a
busy
full
man.
time. Yes. So April 1st this year, I retired from the military. So right now, I am just chillaxing. Um, I decided to take a few months for myself
Nice.
and redo my resume, and then probably August timeframe, I'm gonna put my resume back out there, fix up my LinkedIn, and see what's out there. Who needs me?
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I love it, Randy. So obviously you've done a lot. You've seen a lot. Before we get started, I always ask this. I always like to ask this question. Sometimes I forget, but I always like to ask it, especially from somebody who's been in, and around the realm for this long. What would your definition of burnout be?
So um, I felt it at my last position. I got to a point where I found myself, and I didn't realize it at first. I just felt like I was in a funk, but eventually I realized I was going through the motions. I would I'd be okay. I have to be at work at 7:30. Be at work at 7:30. Okay, leave at 5. Leave at 5. What did I do today? I don't really know. I just kind of went through the motions. I stopped really thinking. And in some cases, it would take me a little longer to think about things. I used to have answers quickly, but now I reached that point where I just couldn't think straight, and all I could think about was, um, I've been doing this for so long. I've been depended on by many people. I get called all hours of the night, weekends, to the point where I never felt like I was off.
Yeah.
And I got to that point where I was a little over a year out from my promotion board, my next promotion board, and I had no interest. I decided at that point, I'm done. I have nothing more to offer, and I need to make a change, and also for my health, because I saw it was affecting my health, so I needed to get out. So I put in my retirement, and had a couple of people talk to me and say, "Hey, we really need you. Can you stay?" And I said, I'd love to. I know there's people that need me, but it can't just be me all the time. Other people need to step up.
Yeah. So that energy drain, that I just don't have anything else left in me kind of
Right.
thing. What do you believe were the key components that got you to that point?
Uh, like a 24/7 operation, um, over um, over requesting for information from me, from my people, overthinking, working up to 20-hour days, um, always always trying to get that last bit of work done, but realizing, hey, there's going to be more work tomorrow. So and not only that, but always working shorthanded, so
Yeah.
that always took an effect.
When you say the shorthanded, just explain that. Explain more. Like, obviously, you were deputy chief. You were at that high level. I know the people at the bottom. You always hear it. I mean, even when I was at the bottom, I'm sure when you were at the bottom, it was like, oh my God, we need more staff. And there's always the bosses. Why can't they just get us more people at that level? Explain what you mean at that level by um, shorthanded.
So um, you have at my last level, you have your allotted manpower, and that's what you're set at. And you have to do all of your work, even with the increased requirements that are thrown at you. Excuse me. You're still expected to do all that work with the same amount of people. So what we eventually did is we had to fight for it, of course, and we added several positions. And it's not just me. We had a team work this, and we added, I want to say probably 400 positions over the course of a couple of years, to help all of our organizations and our headquarters element, to make sure that we had some more able bodies, alleviate the stress that was going on with everybody trying to complete the workload.
Gotcha. So you did, you did work on that. How long were you in that role for, in that position, if you mind me
Uh,
asking?
so my last role, the deputy chief, and really it was kind of like I mean, if you compare it to like New York City,
Yeah.
we have all these precincts. So we have 37 organizations across the country. Um, I was in that role for 4 years.
Wow. What was different between the beginning compared to the end? What changed?
So the beginning, of course, moving up the ranks. When I took on this role, I said I made a promise. When I have a good reputation that if I promise something, I'm going to follow through. So I was one of those, we'll say, precinct commanders, um, that was complaining to the headquarters, hey, this is what we need. We're having problems doing this. We're having problems doing this, and didn't really see much forward progress. So then when I, was put into the role, I saw why. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's limited funding, but I'm kind of one of those guys that said, there's a way. It's going to happen.
We
need
find
it.
a way. You can always find a way to make it happen.
Yeah. So, I would brief our senior leaders on multiple occasions. And it was kind of like I already had my notes because it was the same notes every time. And eventually they caved and we got our stuff. So,
Okay, cool. So you got into that role, you made that promise, and you got your stuff. And what do you think changed between when you first got into that role compared to when you got to that stage of being burned out in it, and then obviously you ended up retiring? What changed over that time to cause you to get to that burnout, do you think?
I think just the constant, um, the workload, there was always something we needed to fight for, and
Mm,
it never stopped. And then, of course, COVID hit, so that all these rules came down about COVID and travel, and when you're sending your law enforcement to other locations, well, there's different requirements, and then there's the quarantine periods, things that you have to take into effect or consideration. So just a lot of moving parts. And then I don't want to get into too deep so that I give out secrets or anything, but
yeah, I know how it is. I know how it is. You can't give out all the hidden secrets of everything. No, okay. So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is that obviously you got into that role pre-COVID, what, a year and a half, 2 years before COVID, year and a bit before COVID, would it have been?
yes,
Yeah.
right.
During that time, were things moving along, doing pretty well? Did you feel like, in your position, you were able to actually get things done? Obviously, you're always fighting for stuff at that level. You're constantly fighting for things.
It was slow. It was a slow process. However, we were able to move some things forward. COVID really put a damper on things because COVID became the sole focus.
Yeah.
How are we going to have our law enforcement show up? How are do they have the needed materials, the PPE, um, their gloves, their masks, their whatever protective gear they need, um, and then of course I believe it was the Health Services Administration, or whatever they're called, had sole dibs on all medical supplies. So if you needed gloves, well, you can hope that you can get some allocated to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I get it. So then COVID hit. Do you believe that if COVID hadn't hit, you would have burned out when you did?
Uh, that's a good question. Maybe, maybe not. It just, there was always a workload. And, as in my position, I was always there. And I always, I was always brought up that if your boss is in the office, you're in the office there to help him or her. So if my boss stayed late, I stayed late because I wanted to make sure that they were successful. Um, so it's hard to say, but probably I would say probably just with the way that things were going, the amount of work, but that I will say that we got a lot done.
Yeah. No, at that level, it sounds like you're a go-getter, and you don't take no for an answer. So it just keep going for it. Hindsight's obviously a great thing because we can think back, but we also learn a lot through the process. I mean, you've got 26 years in some sort of law enforcement capacity,
Yeah.
in some way or another. And, with the military and Air Force and that, what would you say moving forward? Obviously, we can't change the past, but moving forward, what ideas would you have to help change that so that the next person who takes your role or the people below, that you were leading, don't burn out? What are some key things that you think could change in the leadership, could change in the policies, could change in any of it if you're open to talking about it?
So first of all, self care.
Mm.
Got to take care of yourself. And what I found myself doing, uh, I took care of the mission. I took care of the people. I was last. I was always last. And it was kind of something that instilled into me when I was in the Army. Like officers always eat last. Officers always, make sure that the enlisted are taken care of, and then they're taken care of. But I took it to the extreme.
The captain stays with his ship until the last person's off of it kind of,
yes,
mindset.
yes, exactly. So I made sure things were running. We meetings were covered. People had someone to talk to in person. And then, next thing you know, it's 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then, I have to go home to my family, which, this led to my second divorce too. So, I just wasn't there for them because I was always at work.
Yeah. So I know,
But
like you said self-care. Sorry to interrupt real quick. You said
mhm,
self-care. Obviously it's a huge buzzword at the moment running around like everywhere. Um,
yes,
and then, I've talked to people, yeah, that, I've had people in my trainings and that where it's like, you just don't get it. You can't do it at this level.
mhm.
What would you say to those people?
So here's what I've learned recently. Now that I'm retired, I went to one of my previous organizations, thinking, hey, I used to be in charge of this place, and I did a lot of great things, and I walked in there, a lot of new faces, nobody knew who I was. So when I look back to think about all the hours I worked, all the days off that I worked, and then just a few years later, so many people don't even know who I am. I should have taken better care of myself because um, that workload is always going to be there. It never goes away. And um, as long as you do your best, that should be good enough. Because when you leave that organization, they're replacing you. With anybody really. Um,
They have to.
and
The workload's
especially
still there.
law enforcement, military right now, it's warm body in the seat and it's covered.
Yeah.
So
So thinking to that from like a performance, preventing burnout, because I'm all about that prevention side of stuff, for somebody that, is in there, they're doing like you were, they're grinding, they're pushing hard, and then they hear, okay, I need to take care of myself. What would you tell them in the way of how to do that? How to
I
take
would
care of
say,
themselves when there's all that pressure of, there's all that workload pressure, and also why they should do it, like what it's going to create for their career as well.
mhm. So first, I would say schedule it. Schedule
Mm,
that self care during the day. In the military, of course, we have fitness tests and stuff. And of course, I didn't do as well as others because others were actually doing self care. But whatever. So uh, I would say definitely schedule it. Make sure that nothing interrupts that. Unfortunately for me, there's a lot of meetings that would just pop up last minute. Like really, like, hey, what are you doing? The general just called a meeting or whatever. So it would be, gotta go.
yeah, yeah,
Thought about leaving a couple times, but probably wouldn't have worked out well for me.
yeah, yeah.
So, but I think that you have to think about the future. Or you want to keep your health in check because you want to live longer. You want to collect that pension, and you want to be around for your family.
Hmm. How do you think performance, if you had taken, obviously you performed really well, you wouldn't have got to the levels that you did if you hadn't, from, pushing and grinding really hard. How do you think that performance would have laid out if you had actually taken more self-care?
I think my stress may have decreased a little bit. Just being out of the office for hour and a half, um, you know, going on a run or something. Um, just de-stressing, getting away from the office and actually working out. I think it would have probably improved my performance and also allowed others to step up and handle
Yeah.
last minute things that might pop up while I was out of the office.
I think that's a key thing there is a lot of people, and tell me if this was, it sounds possibly like, you had some of that in there in yourself, which there's nothing wrong with it. You got stuff done, but that, like you said, people didn't step up. A lot of people that I've talked to and interviewed and coached, it's that, oh, I need to do it because I'll do it better, or I need to do it because there's nobody else that can do it. When, like you just said, if you had been out of the office and there was no other option, somebody would have had to step up and actually learn from it and actually
Right.
done it. Do you believe that that's something that's essential for the leadership to actually remind themselves of?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And in fact, um, as a leader, I had some great teams, some teams that I knew their strengths, I knew their weaknesses, I knew how to not overburden them. And I tried to always take care of them. So I knew if they worked a day off, then I wanted to give them another day off somewhere, fit it in somewhere so they can spend time decompressing or spend time with their family. I was not one of those guys that were like, hey, you're in the military, we got you 24/7. No, no, because burnout.
Yep.
uh, so yeah, I had some great teams, um, teams that my team members knowing their strengths and weaknesses. I'm calling them at a moment's notice for all kinds of stuff, whether it's um, a budget meeting for another organization, like our parent organization might need somebody on a moment's notice because their expert called in sick. So I would ask one of my guys, hey, do you think you can cover this? And they would do it, and they would do it better than the person whose job it was. So I don't know if it was a good thing because my organization got called on a lot to help
Well,
others.
when you're efficient and you're productive, it
Yeah,
naturally happens because people want
yeah,
the most efficient and fastest thing. They want it done the most efficiently and the fastest.
right.
Um,
But the positive to that was that all their names were well known, and they were looked at as you know stars for the organization, and they couldn't do anything wrong.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, and so there you go. There is the pros with it, pros and the cons of all of it. As a person, as a the not at your position, everybody, those that are kind of coming up through the ranks and that, what advice would you give to them in order to make sure that one, they don't lose their families, they don't lose their health, they don't lose themselves, but also still perform at that high level so that they can, promote if that's what they want to do? What would your advice be to them?
So of course, that going back to self care, you got to take care of yourself so that you have that energy to handle everything that's coming at you, whether it's family, whether it's work, whether it's personal interests, recreation, um, and then remember, just do your best. If you do your best, you can't go wrong. Put in your time, whether it's 8 hours or 9 hours or whatever it is. Um, do your workload, and then go home. And um, remember that work will be there tomorrow. So no matter what you do today, it's still going to be there tomorrow.
Yep, it's not going to go away. Uh,
Right.
how did you well, did you do it well? Did you disconnect well when you like would go home and you'd have those times where you'd be actually away from work, or maybe it was just on the vacations that you did it? How like did you ever have that kind of disconnect, or was it that thing of or I mean, you kind of did mention that you were always kind of turned on. Did you ever have times where you did disconnect?
I think once for a week, or maybe I think it was a week. I went to the Bahamas,
Yeah.
and so I was out of the country. But I also had my chief of operations was a phenomenal officer, and I had full trust in him to handle things. So, when I was down there, I took it easy, drank the pina coladas, gained like 15 pounds in that week. Just I didn't realize how many calories in a pina colada, but
There's a lot. There's a lot of cream in those.
yeah, yeah. But I'll tell you, it was the most relaxing week I've ever had.
Yeah. Obviously you're retired now. You've learned a lot. We learn by our mistakes, our past, and looking at it. How would you disconnect better if you had to do it over again?
Ooh, I'd probably not be a cop for a
That wasn't the answer I was looking for there, Randy.
while. So, it's so hard. Even when I was a civilian law enforcement, everywhere I went, it seemed I'd run into people I've dealt with on the job. And, it could be at the mall, a kid's place, wherever. So it was very hard to turn it off. Um, but, I know a lot of people go camping. So they kind of go into you know, the woods, we'll just say, and they get away from electronics, and just decompress there, which I think is a great thing. Um, and then you have to have a good boss. I've in law enforcement, I've had a combination. One of the departments I worked with, I think I had 6 or 7 chiefs in 6 years, and it was just a constant turnover. So trying to figure out what the leadership was like or what they wanted, it was kind of hard. So just I would say, when you're not at work, try to be more with your family.
Yeah, no, it's so important, running trainings for departments and that on this. It's one of those big things. How do you disconnect when you get home?
Mhm.
One of the tools that I've recognized works really well is it's called anchoring. And it might be something to be able to pass on to some of the people that you still know that are in law enforcement or that you used to work with is anchoring. What anchoring is it's kind of it's that disconnecting. So it can be a movement, it can be a thought process, but normally if you combine the two, it actually helps you disconnect a lot more. So I know of people, and I've trained people, like when they unzip their vest or they unvelcro their vest, it's like they're changing the persona as such. They're changing out of that law enforcement role and into the civilian role that has the knowledge of law enforcement. So you're not like disconnecting and going, hey, I'm just not going to be law enforcement at all, because it won't work. But as
Mhm.
I'm shifting the primary role of who I am. And when you put it back on, it's the shift. It's the, okay, cool. Now I'm the law enforcement officer and a civilian as well. So you're not losing yourself. But doing stuff like that, I've heard of a lot of different people training when you drive into a certain area. The only problem with that is when you drive into a certain area, when you're off duty, your mind instantly turns you on. And so I've just been talking to some law enforcement in LA, and they're like, yeah, when I drive into that area, my wife can physically see a change in me when we drive through, that area, because it's where I work. I was like, yeah,
Oh
that's why
yeah.
you do it at the station or when you walk through the doors, or you do those kinds of things, because it will shift that persona. So even as the director kind of level, it's that you're not turning it completely off, because you can't. Like you said, you're taking phone
Mhm.
calls all the time, but it can also be a movement or something, like even just hitting your chest or just going, just a fist pump, or whatever movement is good for you. When that phone rings, you can go, okay, cool, I've got a shift on. And then you have another movement that kind of disconnects you from it. So then afterwards you're back into, okay, I'm a family man now, or I'm a husband, or I'm a dad, to really kind of help shift that mindset of stuff. Because otherwise, yeah, like I learned this after I left law enforcement. I was like, why didn't I learn that before? Because constantly driving around looking for traffic offenses and criminals and all these different bad people. And then
Mhm.
as a protection officer, I started looking at everybody. And so I went down that road of everybody's bad. So, oh my God, like looking at you in a suit, I'd be like, does he have a weapon? Is it even when I was off duty and not working? It was, and so it drains you mentally. Um, that would be like my big thing. So, I just wanted to pass that on because obviously you were like, having a good boss but there's a few good things there. But something that's in your actual control um, is
Mhm.
is essential to be able to find in my eyes at least.
Right.
How would you see that working better for you if you had been able to if you had learned that, say 10, 15, 20 years ago?
I think that would have been very helpful. Um, again, I think it is dependent on where you work. If you're in that small area and you happen to run into, you know, people that you have to deal with on a daily basis, uh, might not be good. I've lived in a neighborhood where I could just walk to a couple of my calls. Just park my car at my house and just wait for the call to come in, and go to this domestic or go to this problem. Luckily, um, we had a mutual respect,
Yeah.
and they didn't bug me off duty but I could see in some cases that it can affect you, depending on where you live and where you shop, and there's always a threat out there somewhere. You
Yeah.
just never know what's going to hit.
It's also on that threat thing, because I used to live where I worked as well. I literally at
Mhm.
one stage was less than a mile from the police station is where I lived. And one, with that, the threats always being out there, they'll always be out there if you look for them.
Mhm.
And I'm
Exactly.
again, it's that thing of you don't turn it off, but it's that you rely. And it took me ages to learn this after I left. You rely on the training instead of trying to force the training.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, cool. Oh yes, I have locked that guy up before. Okay, cool. I'll just keep an eye on him. I'm not gonna go like approach him and be like, oh my God, I'm the,
Mhm.
because he might not even know that I'm here. He might not even recognize me. I'm gonna
Exactly.
keep an eye on him until he's out of my vicinity
Hmm.
and just out of peripheral and just kind of. But I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, I'm gonna take this guy on.
Yeah.
Different approaches, relying on training versus I'm forcing the aspect. Um, moving on from that, why I'm always fascinated by people's purpose and why, like why they do what they do, why they got into law enforcement, why they stayed in it for so long. What would you say your why is, Randy, that drives you?
I think, from my experience at least, a lot of law enforcement get into it to help people, and to fight crime. Um, what I really like is receiving the thank yous, receiving the uh, you know just seeing the lives that you've saved, whether directly or indirectly. When you get that gun off the street, and that's one less shooting, or maybe multiple shootings that aren't going to happen, um, or when you stop that person from committing suicide, um, or just other folks who you've helped along the way that say, hey, thank you, I've turned my life around, I'm doing very well, or even employees where they were kind of lost on what to do with their careers, and you helped them, and they, some got out of law enforcement, some stayed in law enforcement, and whichever path they took, they still excelled and became leaders in their own way.
That contribution side, being able to contribute to the greater good.
Yes.
Yeah. Nah.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of law enforcement get in to contribute, or do you think there's other reasons why they do it?
You know, um, I I think for some it's a paycheck.
Yeah.
Um, I've kind of seen some of that. Even though it's not a good paycheck, it's still a paycheck.
Pretty secure one these days.
Yeah.
It's getting debatable, but it's pretty secure one normally, unless you do something
Yeah.
stupid.
If you're not in a bad area, and you can, hang out, I mean, you, you can have a pretty easy paycheck coming in. But if you're in a busier area, when I started my career, I was in a busier area. I can run call to call the whole shift, or you know, I moved to a different department in a nicer area, and we were lucky to get one call shift. So it's what you make it. So run traffic or make your own work. I would stop at all the convenience stores that were open, especially as it got dark. Make sure the employees were safe, and I felt that I prevented some robberies just by showing a presence. In fact, I had someone at one point say, "Man, it was like you were everywhere. I would see you on one corner, then I would see you on another corner." I'm like, I'm just doing like, figure eights or um, just driving around, making it known that there are police around.
Yeah. Again, that contributing side. So no, I love that. And there is some there. I remember when I was in law enforcement, on the street, still in front line. We're going back, 10 years now. But I remember the bosses saying, just drive around areas, even if the noting you're like this area doesn't need us in the area. Just by driving a patrol car through the area can stop crime for your entire shift. Because
Hmm.
if a perp is in the area, maybe they're scouting for burglaries, maybe they'll see a patrol car, and even though you're just driving through the area and you're gone within seconds, in their head, psyche wise, it goes, "Oh, cops are in the area," and it'll prevent something from happening, like for like the
Okay.
next 8 hours.
And
And
I,
so,
I, I saw that technique down in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I said, man, there must be a lot of crime down here. There's, police driving around with lights everywhere. They're like, no, they're just driving around.
yeah.
So it kind of showing a presence. And
Well, it's like Hawaii. Hawaii is required to have their solid blue lights on
oh yeah,
constantly.
yeah. Hmm.
To show again for present side of stuff. Obviously, it makes it so you can't do any kind of sneaky squirrel stuff, but um,
Right.
it creates that presence. But again, like here in New Zealand, we're two up cars here in Auckland, and so there was a talk for a while of trialing going to like the United States, where you're one up cars and you send two cars to every job, just to, again, increase the presence of how many people. We don't have the cars to be able to do it, but
Yeah.
so they didn't want to do that expense. But yeah, there is stuff out there, and that contributing side is amazing. What would you say to somebody who's struggling? Maybe they thought they knew their why, they knew why they joined the job. Maybe it was the helping people, but they feel lost and they don't know how
Hmm.
to get back into connecting to that why. What would you say to them around that?
I'd say so. A lot of people are scared to do it, but there's plenty of mental health resources out there, like a counselor. If you're afraid to talk to your family or your coworkers about something, maybe talk to a counselor, and just have that one-on-one with a certified counselor, just to say, hey, look, here's what I'm facing, or just to get it off your chest. Whatever your problem that you feel you have. But I also say, look in the mirror, be honest with yourself, ask yourself that question: do you enjoy what you're doing, or is it just a paycheck? Um, and if you don't enjoy it, if you know it's not what you want to do, then start preparing yourself for what you want to do. And of course, if you don't know what you want to do, then there's resources out there that can help you, whether it's a state uh, unemployment office where they have some job assistance, or if you're a veteran, the VA offers some help with retraining, if you're eligible. And if you go on LinkedIn, there's so many resources out there, people that can help you find jobs, or it's all about making those connections. And if you start doing some research, um, maybe it'll open your eyes and say, you know what, I don't want to be a cop anymore. I want to be um, behind a desk in a big office building, with a nice view. Or
Or I
something.
just
But
want less stress.
yes, less stress. Although I don't know if where you
Yeah, I don't know.
find a
I
lot
don't know.
of
I think it's just kicking the can down the road, to be honest, in some ways. Unless you look at it in perspective. I say this all the time. I did insurance advising for a little while, and I used to get sent all the complaints. Because, that people they'd end up getting complaints. We didn't get many of them, but you'd get complaints around. Oh, I thought it was supposed to be this way, and I was this, and I thought my premiums weren't supposed to go up, and all these little kind of petty things normally.
yeah,
And I got sent one time, and the boss was like, "Man, you dealt with that really well. Like that person was not happy on the phone." And then like they listened back to the recording of me doing the call, and they're like, "Man, you were so calm." I was like, and then so they started sending me more and more, and I was like, "Why are you sending me these?" And they're like, "Because you're so calm on the thing, and you resolve them really easily. It's like you can
yeah,
kind of see what they need." I was like, one, that's coaching, but two, I was like, they're not trying to kill me.
yep,
I was like, they don't have a
exactly.
gun to my face. They're on the other side of the phone. I can hang up on them if I want to. If they're really pissed me off, I can just hang up on them and call them back and be like, "Are you done now?"
Yeah,
Because I was like, it's all perspective. They're not trying to kill me.
exactly.
They don't have a gun. They don't have a knife. They're not trying to beat me up.
Yep.
I've been in all those situations. Okay.
Hmm.
you know, and it is that perspective of looking at that. As you said, the transitioning out. Um, is really making sure that perspective of why and what you're looking for, and also realizing what you're leaving and why you're leaving it.
Right.
um I talked to a lot of officers who leave, in my opinion, for the wrong reasons. They leave because they're
Mhm.
pissed off. They leave because they're annoyed that society doesn't care about them, or that this thing's going on, and they're really bad reasons to leave. Because then it takes a lot of work to figure out, well, why did I actually leave? Like when you're down the road and you've moved, you've thought about different stuff, and then you go, oh, maybe I'll go back to the police. Well, if you never dealt with the
Exactly.
stuff of the reason why you left the police, when you go back, guess what? It's just always there. So you hear a
Right.
lot of cops going back a year later after they leave.
Hmm.
Whereas if you are really clear on why you're leaving, uh, and what you want out of the next role, then you're actually a lot more clear and happy in that decision. Um, so yeah, no, I love your thoughts on the finding that why and finding that purpose, because if you've lost it, you can find it again.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What would you say the impact of the trauma of the job is on affecting,
Ooh.
like coming out, like turning into burnout?
Um, it's there. You know, I been on a lot of calls, seen a lot of stuff. Um, I'll never forget. Some of um, you know, the death stares, or the bodies, or but I also remember the people that we brought back from doing CPR, or um, so I try to outweigh the negative parts with the positive, and work that into my thoughts when I'm thinking about some of the bad calls, um, but that PTS. There's so many resources out there. Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Sugru,
Yep.
um, who's a former law enforcement and also Air Force Security Forces guy who was involved in a book. I think it's like Relentless Courage, and I have that book. There's so many resources that can help people to deal with these emotions, and just get through it. It's hard. I've dealt with it, but I've had a lot of I have a good network. I have
Hmm.
friends and family. Some of my old bosses, though. My one boss, every so often, he sends me a text status check. So I'm like, hey, all good here, sir.
Hmm.
So, and then it'll lead into a conversation about this or that. But people check up on me, and I also check up on others. But I'm very lucky to have that network, and of course, Now that I'm back here in Pennsylvania, I'm near family, and I'm doing a lot of family things. So that helps out too, because there's purpose with that.
Yeah. No, I think you hit a big one on the head there, that network.
Hmm.
Creating a network or having a network. There's tons of networks out there. I really like to promote Power of Our Story because I jumped onto them, and you can just sit there and have a conversation with other first responders, people that have gone through stuff. You can tell your story if you so choose, or you can just listen. But it gives you that sense of purpose, that sense of, oh, wait a second, I'm not alone as well. Other people are
Right.
going through this. And that trauma creeps up on you, man. It creeps up without you even knowing that it's there if you don't process it. How
Yep.
did you, or did you, process your trauma back in the beginning?
So, again, I go back to the network. So when, um, you know, I started feeling the emotions coming up, but, anger. Um, and I phoned a friend. I said, "Hey, I need to see you right now." And we were both at work, and he came right away. We talked, and I felt so much better because we had like experiences.
Hmm.
He was in Iraq, I was in Afghanistan. We both saw similar stuff, um, and just having that anytime that you feel like you're going to explode or lose it, just having that contact, that network, to be able to call somebody and just talk it out. Um, it helps so much, and I think it's undervalued, where people are just either embarrassed or scared to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, we all go through something. What's your thoughts on the fact of the different levels of trauma or what we perceive as trauma, or, we're told as trauma versus what somebody else perceives or is told as trauma?
So I think everybody's life experiences are different. So if you grow up in a certain area, you see certain things. But if you grow up in, you know, I don't know, Beverly Hills. I've never been to Beverly Hills, but news makes it sound like it's this plush place. Nothing
Yeah.
ever bad happening, but I'm not sure if that's the case. But um, when you throw in life experiences, um, life kind of sets you up for how much you can handle.
Yeah.
And I grew up. It wasn't a horrible area, but it wasn't a great area, and it was in the city. And I could say now, you don't want to go where I used to live.
Gotten
But
worse, not better.
yes, yes, and um, I think that we do a lot of coddling now. So we're not setting up our future generations for success when it comes to handling crisis or trauma or bad things happening.
Mm.
We're setting them up to panic, and it's the first responders. They're going to go and calm everything down, save their lives. But then now we're back to how do the first responders handle what they've just been through. And
Yeah.
um, again, I think it's the experience level of the first responders also. Are they rookies? Are they 20-year veterans? Are they in a nice area? Are they in a bad area? It just there's so many um, so many different criteria to look at. Um, Very hard to say how we can really fix that other than putting everybody through mandatory trauma training or something.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that is the kind of thing. I was going to ask that question. How do you think that we set these officers, military, police, first responders up to help prevent the trauma really, knocking them all because society's doing what society's doing and we can't necessarily change that, but we can help the that career, is there any tips or tools that you would recommend for those future or new law enforcement or military to help prepare themselves for the level of trauma that they're going to see? Because we know out of studies and that law enforcement see 18 times as much trauma as a civilian will, in their first year as a civilian will their entire life. So how do you think after your, long and successful career, we prepare them for that?
I think it's, some departments are now doing better at that. So I think you did a presentation for Aurora PD, and
Yeah.
I follow Captain Moody on LinkedIn, and I see the investment that they're making into training and taking care of their officers, and I think that is, they're kind of leading the way from what I can see. Now I don't follow all departments, but I know that a lot of departments can't afford to have this training or whatever. And I can tell you for the how can I put this? Some of the training I've gone through um, has been a lot of it's been virtual, and it's kind of, there's a script. Uh, so the in-person portion, people read off a script, say, okay, everybody good, all right, see you next year. Uh, and it's horrible training, and they wonder why bad things continue to happen with their personnel. So I really believe that, um, from what I've seen, Aurora PD is kind of out front, taking care of their officers, and don't take that. I hope no other police department gets mad at me for saying that, but it's what I've seen so far, that they're doing a good job at
Yeah.
getting the training out there.
Yeah, no, they're bringing a lot in since Randy and I we become friends as such as well. They're doing a lot of different trainings for their officers, kind of trialing different things out and running lots of different stuff through. I know Pinal County Sheriff, I ran a training for them as well for Sheriff Lamb and their executive team. And then yeah, there's a few good departments out there that are doing a lot of good stuff. But I love the fact that you said giving people that resiliency training, that the different tools on how to prevent it is essential. Randy, anything else that you'd like to add or advice that you'd like to give for listeners and viewers?
Uh, just remember that the job is not the most important thing in your life. It's important to feed your family, but family is part of that, and make sure you're taking care of your family. Make sure that you're keeping your contacts close. Don't blow off a friend for 6 years and then call them out of the blue. Oh, hey, I'm ready to talk again. Uh, that's what I do. Uh, so yeah, friends and family are very important, and they're always going to be there for you. Whereas the job, once you're done with the job is done with you. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind, that they're not going to know you, you know, 5 years after you leave the job. There'll probably be so many new faces that you're just somebody who used to work there, and that old retiree that is bothering them now. So
It's funny. It's sadly true. There's certain people that will stick around and they're the
yeah,
well, that will be there always and be there for you and that and then there's the ones that yeah, they just kind of, oh yeah, he used to work here years ago.
oh
um
yeah.
and yeah, it's an interesting culture. um
Mhm.
well, thank you, Randall, Randy, for being here. I appreciate all your service, your time, your everything that you've given. Obviously, if there's anything that we can do, or if there's any viewers out there that are like, hey, wait a second, have a look at Randy's LinkedIn. We'll put his LinkedIn link down in the description as well, so people can go have a look at Randy's LinkedIn. If you want to, look at him, or you're like, hey, wait a second, I need somebody like Randy on my team, then please do reach out to him. I know that he'll message you back on LinkedIn. How else can people get in touch with you, or how else would you like people to get in touch with you, Randy, if they so choose, or maybe they want to touch base, they want to talk to you, they resonated with you and they want to talk to you, or they just want to reach out and have that, that status check with you, what's the best way for people to get in touch that you'd like?
I believe my email's on my LinkedIn also, but just in case, it's RPG 2228 at yahoo.com.
Cool. Perfect. So we'll put that down below as well. And yeah, at worst, just reach out to Randy. He's really quick on getting back on his messages. That's how he ended up here. I reached out to him and was like, "Hey, Randy, you want to be on a podcast?" And he was like, "Never been on one, but yeah, cool, let's do it." And
Yeah, I'm
so,
retired. I got nothing better to do. So.
besides spend time with your grandkids,
Yeah.
but no, I appreciate you being here, Randy. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. And yeah, a lot of insights, a lot of good things for people out of somebody who did the job for 26 years, burned out and decided to leave. And there's lots of learnings there, and that's why we do this podcast, is to take your experiences or take guest experiences and teach, because people resonate with people in different ways. Before we close out, any last words, Randy?
No, I just thank you for everything that you do. It's much needed. Much too late, but hopefully we're starting something good out there, and people like you are really making a difference. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Randy. I appreciate the kind words. So again, this is Fight the Burnout, where we teach and we interview individuals on burnout and trauma and how to prevent it, how to overcome it, so that you can love what you do after 20 plus years, like it was day one. Uh, if you are looking for more assistance, please do either email us or go to our website. It's createfromwhy.com. That's createfromwhy.com, or createfromwhy at gmail.com. And you can, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with people if we can't help you ourselves, or if you just need to have a conversation, we're always here for it. But remember, train hard, test easy, and stay safe out there. Love to you all.